Welcome to the Information Security Forum videocast. I'm your host, Tavia Gilbert, and today we're featuring ISF Managing Director Steve Durbin in conversation with Reggie Butler, a highly recognized motivational speaker and corporate consultant and educator with over 30 years of experience in delivering transformative learning solutions within the private and corporate sectors. In this interview, Reggie discusses the pressure to perform at a high level, the priority of finding focus and clarity in messaging, finding the right cadence for optimal performance, and more.
So Reggie, hi, thanks for stopping by. You've refined a technique to inspire businesses to reconsider and shape company dynamics, which is really very important in the whole cyber culture today. One of the things I'd really like to start with is you telling us a little bit about this technique that you've developed that you call Find Your Rhythm. What's all that about?
Yeah, so it was born out of a need where people are going through a lot of change. And so if you think of just how the world is shaped right now, and there's a lot of discourse and unrest, and what people don't seem to realize is that that translates into a person's individual being, and they're not actually giving their best at work. So if you think about that as the baseline, okay. Find Your Rhythm has a lot to do with how do you actually find the right cadence for you to reach your highest productivity? How do you find the right cadence to reach your best version of yourself? I'm going to posit that a lot of people come to work and they're not actually fully there, even though they say they are. Mm-hmm. And it takes a while to get into the rhythm of the day to actually start to do some of your best work. And there's a lot of studies out there that bear this information. So if you think of workforce engagement studies and things like that, so when are people actually doing their best work? For some people, it's at different times of the day. Right. For some people, it has to do with the environment that they're in. For some people, it's the work that they're doing. And cutting through all of that is no matter whether it's the environment or the people or the work, you still have to find a way to get in the right kind of cadence so you can have optimal performance. So Find Your Rhythm is about finding your optimal performance in any given situation. And
that applies across all levels of the organization, right? Right. And do you find differences perhaps working with up and down? So, is the CSuite, for instance, more difficult to work with than the rest of the guys? Tell me a bit about that.
Yeah, and I don't look at it through the lens of being people having difficulties. I look through the lens of everybody has a different path that they're on in order to get something done. So if I'm at the C-suite level, they're dealing with very complex problems. And it's not that the rest of the workforce, it's not that they're not dealing with complex problems, it's that they're shaped differently at the C-suite level. Right. And one of the things we have to get C-suite leaders or people who are in positions of power and influence to understand is their ability to focus and add the type of clarity in messaging down into the organization is what allows people at the ground level, the people who are doing the work, to actually be the best version of themselves. Mm-hmm. So I think about, there was a situation where there was a change in how they were going to run a particular project. Okay. And so from the leadership level, they had a lot of investment in time in thinking about how they're going to have to reshape how they're going to deliver that project. The information that went downstream didn't have enough clarity in it. So what you had was confusion down at the bottom. They said, so why are we changing? What are we doing? What are we supposed to do next? And the middle management just said, it came from above. Right. Just do it. Mm-hmm. And we're on a tight timeline, a tight deadline. And while very polite, very cordial, the issue was there wasn't enough clarity. And so what happened at that level, the people who were doing the project, the recipients of doing the work, had lost their rhythm. It's like when I knew what I was doing and why I was working on it, I could work one way. Now I don't know why I'm working on it this way, and it's making me slow down. So if I want to optimize performance, I have to get people at the C-suite. People are making these decisions to have more clarity, more focus. So as it goes downstream, people can actually do their best work. So that's an example of taking the strata from above all the way down to the bottom, to saying there's a rhythm and a cadence throughout the entire chain.
And I think that's particularly relevant for security organizations. I mean, when I look at some of the challenges that they face today, it's a fast-changing environment. Perhaps there isn't that consistency of focus between the highest level in the organization right the way down through it. And one of the things that for me is really challenging is the two-way flow of information and communication. So some tips around what security departments might do to improve that?
Yeah, so something comes to mind, and if you think about this, so because the sophistication of threats it's increasing, but also the implementation of some of the things that impact our communities are actually easier to do.
Right.
So if you think about what we're trying to solve now, one of the things that in this type of community is when there's two-way communication, when something goes down and says, so we're trying to stop or investigate, what the source is of this particular threat. So if you think of it that way. And there are some people down there working on it. While they're working on it and they find out what the root cause may be or the source could be, there are some insights along the way that they picked up on that may prevent something in the future. But if they're in a culture that says just find the source, and I'm not asking for the other information, and that culture is not shaped to pick up those insights and do something with it, they can't be proactive for the future because things are moving so fast.
Right.
And I think of this, ambiguity. So ambiguity in this space particularly is the norm. Like there are no codified walls. There's nothing that it's going to be like this, and we can plan for this for the next 2 years this way. That's not true.
Yep.
And in a lot of organizations, it's not true, but I think of this space specifically as the things they have to deal with are so fast moving, and intentionally they don't stay still, so they can't be caught.
Right.
So what do you actually do in that particular situation? So one of the tips we tell people is as you're moving along on the research side of trying to investigate something is also to have the muscle built to pick up insights along the way. Take those insights, and this is to your two-way communication, is to actually laterally spread that information out to someone on a task force that their only job is to look at the insights and see how they can apply it. Then make sure that information gets funneled into a tiger team or another task force that's actually planning things for the future. If you can keep that clean and keep that kind of clarity, you actually wind up reducing some of the threats, or at least the potential of threats, because you're thinking about it in a longer ramp.
So what I'm hearing is that we're talking about trying to put in place a dynamic change program that can map to the transformations that are ongoing on a minute-by-minute basis across the enterprise, right?
Right.
So if I'm in an organization, how do I physically implement that? Do I call up my HR guys and get them involved? Do I have a specific transformation project manager? Let's get a little bit more granular about how we do this.
So let's look at it at a team level. So if I am working with you on a team and we're both trying to solve a problem, we'll put it that way, and you fill in the blank for whatever the problem is.
Right.
And you and I have created a cadence. We've created a rhythm with each other for how we get things done. And then someone new gets added to the team. Our job as quickly as we can is to have them folded into the team in such a way that we now have a rhythm, because we lose information and we lose time. As long as that person is on the outside, even though they're on our team, as long as that person is sitting on the outside, the amount of energy that it takes to bring them up on their learning curve takes away from the energy we should be spending as a team trying to solve the problem. So at a very granular level, I tell people all the time, or I ask this question, it's really interesting. Whose responsibility is it when a new person joins a team on a project to make them fit in? And the range of answers I get is sort of like, well, it's the person, because they have to watch for a while and they have to learn as we go. And I've had other people say, well, it's our job to bring them up to speed as quickly as possible. Right. There's another element to this, though, because what we sometimes forget is that if you and I already have a rhythm, we're already actually leaving other people out of information, because you and I have our own language. Yep. And we've created our own rhythm. So when a third person comes in or a fourth person comes in, our ability to add language to it and all the shortcuts that we take in order to get productivity to happen, that's reciprocal value. So both people have to be involved in the fitting in process so that we can move further faster. I challenge people a lot of time when they come up with these really complex problems. I say, so you want it solved? And the question is, of course, by when? They say now. But what is the pace for progress that's sustainable? Right. Very few people ask that question. They just want to get it solved by Friday, or they want to mitigate something soon. But it's not for a sustainable approach. What is the pace for progress along that? What is the pace for execution and implementation? It's tricky, and sometimes people struggle dealing with that, which is why when I talk about cadences and finding your rhythm, it has everything to do with me owning who I am as it relates to the problem, but making sure that I have a cadence and a rhythm with the people I'm working with.
Okay, some good insights there. Let me take it on to the next stage, because I'm thinking now about the kinds of organizations that are probably listening to this or watching it. Very many of them, no doubt, will be multinational. They'll be working with a variety of different teams, not all in the same location. So we've got some other complexity that's starting to come into the mix now, right?
Yeah.
How do we get that cadence, that rhythm that you've been talking about to work across multiple cultures, multiple time zones, multiple media in terms of communication?
Yeah. So there's, I'm going to use a term that's it's out in the diversity, equity, and inclusion spaces right now. It's this thing called cultural dexterity,
Right.
And it's a muscle people need to build in order to walk across geographic and national boundaries.
Right.
So if you think about that first, and it's like if I don't understand enough about the culture, I possibly can't be doing my best in service of that culture's norms. So if we take that and put that to the side, and you think about cultural dexterity as a skill, what I wanted people to suggest and start to think about is the rhythm and the cadence that I put together with my team. If I am working with somebody that is virtual, that is an entirely different skill and technique, and there are lots of ways to manage expectations, which is really where people should be focusing their attention. If I'm working with you virtually, you're in another country, in another time zone, what are the expectations for how involved we will be and what we'll be doing at those times, whether they're on times, off times, peak times, whatever it is, we have to create that cadence in a virtual format.
Right.
And I'm going to move this just for a quick second into, you would never doubt if it were someone in your family how to adjust and adapt toward a different cadence.
Right.
If someone moved out of your home and they moved to another side of the globe, you would find a way to virtually stay connected if you cared. And I tell people that in business all the time. If you're working with a virtual team, you have to care about them first. You have to know what they're working on before you can create the cadence. And I have sometimes people, they look and go, oh, well, I just need them to do their work. And I'm, well, I know. But do you care about them? Because at that particular point, you would actually pay attention to what their most optimal times are and the kind of information they need from you versus guessing and then having to backstep or backpedal or repeat yourself 3 or 4 times. It's everything about proactive on the front end, creating the expectations that create the cadence.
And this, for me, is going to become increasingly more important. You know, if I look at the way that organizations are constructed today, increasingly because of skill shortage and so on, we do work necessarily with third parties. We do work across time zones. A lot of the way in which we're working today perhaps has been focused, some would say too much, on the contract. You know, you have to reply and respond within these timeframes. You're talking about something that goes to an entirely different level, right? So again, how can we enable some of that?
Yeah, so some of the enablement comes from permissions.
Right.
And I say permissions in this context. When we have the luxury of knowing something is coming up and we get to plan for it, I've watched more individuals and organizations skip the planning phase and go straight to execution.
Right.
So this is when you have the luxury of time, meaning we're going to start this in a month, we're going to have virtual teams in 2 different locations, we've got a new system we need to integrate, those types of things, and you get to plan along the way. And my recommendation has always been, as a part of the planning process, include humans.
Right.
Because we tend to include processes first and outputs versus saying, what is the human interaction we need to have in order to optimize performance? The processes are going to be there. They're supposed to be there, but there's humans that are wrapped around it, and we have to figure out how to integrate the two in the planning process. Now, when you're in a different situation where you are reacting to something, if you had done the planning part well, then when you're reacting to a threat or you're reacting to something that was unexpected, you already have things in place so that people know how to shift and they know how to pivot. Because in the work that I do, when I talk about cultural norms and nuances, one of the things that people don't pay attention to until it's too late is, how do we get things done here? When you have time, people can explain it. When you don't have time, if you haven't already told people how we get things done here, who makes the decisions, who should I talk to, who does this need to be vetted through, Where do the permissions come from? You watch things start to implode and they start to fall apart. And then while you're being reactive, you're actually not providing the best solutions. Usually, you have to recover from them. And that's why I sometimes laugh when people say, what are the best practices? And I tell people all the time, best practices is a result of someone's mistake in a very specific culture. So I can tell you what the best practice is. I'm not going to share you use 100% of it because that was their culture, their time, with their rhythm and their cadence, with all those things in place. And they created a best practice out of the result of overcoming or recovering from a mistake.
Right. Okay. I mean, this has been fascinating because for me, one of the real challenges that from a security standpoint we need to face up to and deal with is people. I think we're very, very good at talking about process, technology, but for me, increasingly, it's all about the people. So, Reggie, thanks very much for sharing some of those insights into how we can really improve that level of collaboration. It's a lot of hard work, but from the way you've been talking, I think that the payback is well worth it.
Can I try something?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I want to think about, because I'm going to ask you a question, and it's sort of like modeling what I want everybody else to do.
Okay.
So when you've lost your rhythm, so you're having a bad day, you're off your game. It's that simple.
That doesn't happen.
How do you find your rhythm to get back? Like, what do you do?
What do I do? I think I take time out. So I will just calm it down. I'll stop what I'm doing. I will probably maybe even disappear for 5 minutes or so and just reset.
Okay.
And then I'll come back and go again.
So when you're resetting, when you're away, what is in your head that you're resetting on? Is it on what is the problem? Is it why did it happen? It's who do I need to talk to? When you're resetting, what are you doing?
I'm disconnecting completely from the problem. So I'm going back to my place.
Okay.
And I'm not concerned about any of the stuff that came before. I'm just getting myself reset. And then I'll go back into it, and quite often I'll have a different perspective on it.
Okay, and so what I share, and thank you for saying that, is that everybody, which is what I'm trying to get people to understand, is everybody has their own reset in order to find their cadence. If I'm working with you and I don't know that, when you walk away to reset, I may think you quit.
Right.
I may think you decided this isn't worth it anymore. And if you don't come back and say something to me, which is the skill I'm trying to get people to do, understand what a person's reset button is, what it looks like, what they're doing, so that you can be helpful when they come back and there's no confusion.
Right.
So, no, thanks for doing that. I'm gonna challenge everybody. To do that. What's your individual reset in order to find your rhythm?
Fantastic. Reggie, thanks very much indeed.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Thanks.
This has been awesome.
Thanks for tuning in to our videocast with Steve Durbin in conversation with Reggie Butler. For more videocasts, podcasts, and other resources for CISOs and anyone looking to enhance the security of their business, please visit securityforum.org. And we'd like to hear from you. If there's a topic you'd like us to cover or someone you'd like us to interview, get in touch through our website or tweet us at Security Forum. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.